Welcome everybody to another edition of the In the Paint Show, episode 148. As we bring in the new year, Happy New Year to all our listeners, and we appreciate people sticking with us, listening after all these episodes. Again, we're at 148. It's been a few years, Ani. We've obviously done some on video, and we have the old ones on iTunes and Spotify. So how are you going? How are you doing? And how's your new year? And appreciate you being with me as usual. Our girl Chelsea is she's doing her thing in Israel, so she wouldn't be able to join us, but she'll be joining us on the next one. But how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing good, man. Happy New Year's. I'm glad to get back going. It's been a minute since our last episode. I know people have been waiting, like, hey, when we come back? So, we're going to start out in 2023. This is this is almost like a 1 year anniversary for me on the show. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it is about a 1 year anniversary. Again, we've done about, like I said, the last year, maybe about 30, 35 on video. And so check out our YouTube page on the Ballislife Podcast Network. Make sure to check out the other ones that rock it on the Ballislife Podcast Network. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, we're trying to get this our numbers up, trying to get more people listening. So share it. Make sure tell people about it. We appreciate you guys sticking with us. We've been off for a couple of weeks, but it's for good reason. We've been going to events. We haven't had much time. Trying to spend a little time with our family, but really we've been in the gym.
Yeah. You ain't lying.
Tarkanian, then you go back to California for you. You went to Whataburger. Tell us a little bit about where you were before the Whataburger.
I was in New York, so I went and watched the CBS event where Ohio State played, Kentucky, and UCLA played. And then I went and watched Christ the King and Cardinal Hayes. That was my first high school game in New York, and it was interesting, seeing the setup, seeing the people, seeing the basketball, like I saw New York basketball. Tough guys that can really handle, score it, a lot of flair, a lot of talking. But yeah, it was fun. How about you?
Yeah, I was obviously watched that game when Christ the King came out here against the Sierra Canyon. They lost on the road, so then they go back home and they pretty much manhandled Cardinal Hayes.
What?
And the thing is, the New York teams on a national level right now are not, they're not doing great. They're doing Christ the King's doing okay, but people could, again, as the world turns, the results come in. New Jersey's getting started, but New York is looking to pick it up, and I'm sure they'll finish strong. But across the board, they're just doing okay right now. Cardinal Hayes started off real high in the Fab 50, and Christ the King did too, and they're both out right now. Obviously, Christ the King can't be higher in Sierra Canyon, and Sierra Canyon is only like 5th or 6th in California. So,
right.
That and Sierra Canyon got another big game this upcoming week, Chosen Ones Invitational. As you listen to this podcast, we're shooting on Tuesday the 3rd, but they'll be playing Wheeler with Isaiah Collier here in Galen Center. I think St. Vincent St. Mary's coming out again with our coach, our guy Drew Joyce, who's been Drew Joyce II, who's been a guest on our podcast. So obviously, his son has been a guest on our podcast about a month ago. He had some great insight, but yeah, they got to pick it up. Teams, it's hard. It's hard. I think that's the key going into 223. It's just hard to win every game with all these events, tournaments, travel. And we'll talk a little bit about it later. Just like even the crazy travel. I hope everybody had a good holiday experience because some people didn't. These airlines, they're tripping. These airlines are tripping. Let's just leave it at that. The airlines are tripping,
man.
Yeah, you hear all these nightmares, and there are some true nightmares involved in high school basketball. And we'll get to that later. But I think we'd be remiss not to start off our show in the new year. Again, a lot of things have happened, but we got to talk about Damar Hamlin, the defensive back from the Buffalo Bills, who on Monday Night Football, kind of in a shocking manner, he makes a tackle. He gets up and he collapses, and then right away people are like, well, what's going on? But Ani, could you tell right away it wasn't football, like it wasn't a football play, or did you, when you saw the replay, I don't know if you're watching the game, that what had happened, or did you just think it was like, man, this is crazy, it could happen in football, or did you realize this is not a football issue?
At first I thought it was when he was down, because I was actually just had the game on. And then after a while I was like, oh, like when you saw the people coming in, you're like, no, this isn't football. This is for real. And then when it was like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then they're just staying there, it's like, no, this dude's fighting for his life right now. that was it. I mean, I never seen that in a football game. Just
Sure.
you hear about like players collapse. You hear about
Sure.
and you see how that goes sometimes at the end. So it was a scary moment. I just thought it was a football. I thought it was just football. Something happened, but then when you saw paramedics come in, they're trying to revive him. That's when it was like, okay, this is
Yeah.
more than that.
Yeah. I kind of saw when I saw the play, I kind of knew it wasn't football right away because he got up and then he collapsed. He kind of got up, sprung up from the tackle or the hit, and then it's like something happened. And you kind of, again, you don't want to speculate. None of us are doctors, but it's like this seems kind of like cardiovascular or some kind of heart issue. That's what you're
Mm-hmm.
normally going to think, and that's what it was. And then it comes out later that he had a heart condition and he had a cardiac arrest basically.
Yeah.
You could tell by the players their reaction that it was super serious. And then there was some question of like, is the game going to continue? Or is this too serious? And then people kind of gave the sentiment that like, no, this game shouldn't continue. And
Right.
it didn't. And then everybody went to the hospital to check him out. But yeah, just a little more background on Damar. He was a all ACC selection at Pitt. He's from Pitt. Pittsburgh itself. He went to Central Catholic High School, which is a well-known high school for producing football players. Other than that, he's a good young player. He's very young, and it's now he's fighting for his life. What just does it make you think of? Does it make you think of just like how things can change real quickly? Does it make you think of football as a dangerous sport and stuff can happen? Does it make you think of maybe there's a lot of us have underlying conditions that we've never gotten checked? You think he's
Right.
healthy? He's a young man. What is your initial reaction to that?
My initial reaction was like, just thank God that I was able to play basketball, and none of that happened. Because
Sure.
you just never know, like those
Yeah.
underlying like health conditions and heart. We see that like, oh no one knew that he had an enlarged heart or this, that, and the third, and
Sure.
the guy passed. So it's just scary,
Yeah.
when life like that hits, it just scares like, man, these guys are playing and you just never know.
Yeah.
You just never know. Like we talked about, we heard about in the summer, with Vince, USC, this is
Correct.
multiple occasions, Hank Gathers,
Yes.
we go way back, but it just guys that we just didn't know what happened, and it just happens. So it's scary how like sports is supposed to kind of take people away from life for that time
For a time span. Yeah.
Yeah, but when it happens in sports, you're like, can't escape life.
No, yeah, it's real life, and it sounds like what I thought too was how long does it take them to get to the paramedic, and then seems like they did a really good job. I know the Bills and his family were kind of very thankful that the medical personnel got to him and what they were able to do, and he was in intensive care unit at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. He remains there. This is obviously a challenging time for his family, but they want to acknowledge, again, I'm just reading this. It says, we want to acknowledge the dedicated first responders and healthcare professionals at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center who provided exceptional care to Damar. We feel so blessed to be part of the Buffalo Bills organization and to have their support. So his family said, so, those nice words. They were, they everybody just wanted, it seemed like players were just like, I just want to hug my teammate, or like
Right.
even some mothers and family members that were there were like, I just want to get on the field and talk to my son and hug him. That's like you said, it's bigger than football. And the two things I thought about were, one, and this is, as people listen to this podcast, we talk about high school, mostly talk about high school basketball, but we do talk about a lot of things, is if you have an event, make sure there's a qualified medical person there. That makes a huge
Please.
difference. Like, please do that. Spend the extra money. I know maybe there's different rules in different states and different cities. Like, but I know it's like not a national mandate that there's a qualified medical personnel there. We call them trainers, but they're supposed to be qualified in CPR and other things. And obviously, the main thing you got to do, it's like any accident or when your parents get older or things like that, you got to call 911. I mean, that's what everybody's going to do. But
Right.
still, if those few minutes where somebody's there that kind of knows what they're doing could make a huge difference. So that's
absolutely. No, absolutely. I think every event, like you said, football, basketball, because you've gone to events, Ronnie, where they're like, "Where's the trainer? And then you're like,
well, I went to an event this holiday tournament season, and this kid jacked up his ankle, and the trainer was reading a book, wasn't even paying attention. God. And you know me, Ani, I'd be like, trainer. I'd be that dude, like, at every, even if it's not my event, because that's just what I just respond to that. I've been to so many events. When I go to an event, I'm not as bad as our guy Dinos, but I start looking around like at the exits and who are the trainers. I know all that because it's just a natural thing to do when you're running events. Right. What's safe, what's not, is the chairs too close to the court, all that stuff. So the trainer just wasn't paying attention. Nothing against the trainer. The trainer might have known what they're doing, but they were doing their homework or reading a book. And it's like, you guys don't see this kid like hurt. It just it caught my eye. This was before Hamlin. It caught my eye real fast, and it's just not good. I see that a lot. I see the trainers not being attentive. So everybody, please have a medical personnel that you pay. Just pay the extra money. We know you want the door money, but pay the extra money to have the medical personnel, and then make sure they're paying attention. So I think that's one, and then two, you did mention it. Hank Gathers. That's what I thought about, because there was a football player a few months before Hank Gathers. His name was Kevin Copeland. LA people would know this. He played at LA Dorsey. He was an NFL type talent. People thought he was so popular. He was like a class leader at his school, and he was a senior. And this was in October of 1989, and they had a game at San Pedro High School. Dorsey did, and he collapsed, and he passed. He went to the nearest Harbor Medical Center at the time, whatever. Again, this is over 30 years ago. And you heard about it, and I think he'd passed either on the way to the medical facility, or it wasn't much long after. There was no social media, but he was a big name. And it was so crazy because people had heard what happened, and the news spread what happened. So what happened was people were confused. They didn't know, is he at the hospital? This is 1989. So all the parents and all the people that support the program, because this was a good program with good sports and a good support team, they all went to the school for the bus to get back to the school, right? Because everybody's waiting to see their kid. You can imagine being a parent. You're like, well, player died. What's your first action? Either you're going to go up to San Pedro or you're going to wait for the bus. So you're probably going to wait for the bus because the bus is going to leave. The game was over after that. Right. So it was so crazy when he got back to the school, people found out it said Kevin had died. Dude, like 4 or 5 more girls passed out because they were shocked, and they went to the hospital. They passed out and fell out, just like we call it falling. They just fell out. They were fainted or whatever. And so it was a crazy story because now the medical personnel had to go up to the school. Wow. Because the bus was all the kids were just in shock. So that's the thing I thought about, because he was, a well-known football player, and he had cardiac arrest. And then he didn't know it, but he had the same issue. His father was Ron Copeland, who played for the Chicago Bears. Mm-hmm. And his father died at a young age from heart disease. So he had a problem, Again, we don't know what's going to happen with, Damar Hamlin, but maybe more information will come out. But hopefully he lives a good life and a long life. Like you said earlier, you're just happy that you played ball and nothing happened. And you just wonder, if him or Hank Gathers just stopped playing sports, would they be okay? So in Hank's story, it was crazy because that was a few months later after Kevin. That was a few months later. So that's October 89 to March 90. It was at the WCC tournament here in LA. And in the news that evening, I think I talked about it on an old pod before, Hank and Bo Kimball, who were from Philly, had interned at KTLA Channel 5. So the news anchor at KTL Channel 5 was crying on air. It was such a, because there was video of it. There was video of him collapsing. It was such a heartbreaking moment. It was surreal. I remember seeing it and I was like, who else is going to pass? It was so scary,
Yeah.
Because of what happened to Kevin, and then what happened to Hank. And then a week later at the state final, Lisa Leslie was playing. She was at Morningside High. She was like the best player in the country. And I think she was tired. She was probably fatigued. Maybe she needed an IV and water. You're doing interviews, you're running
Right.
around, she played and she was a little sick. And you know how it is sometimes when you're in high school, Anna, you don't eat right or you're like all
Yeah.
excited. And I think she passed out or like fainted or was like really fatigued and she fell out in the hall. And everybody's like, Lisa Leslie passed out. So you know what people were thinking, like,
Right. Like, here we
oh,
go again.
here we go again, because of the Hank thing had just happened. So people were freaked out. And luckily, she was just fatigued and sick and needed probably an IV.
Right.
And
Right.
obviously Lisa went on to SC in the WNBA. She's fine, but it's just scary, So I don't know if this is what's going to change. I just know that people think like, and it's happened before. Like, there's a lot of mothers out there that are not want their sons playing football like they did 30 years ago. You just
Right.
know it. It is what it is. I don't know. Football's just at there. I mean, I'm glad they didn't continue the game because that
Man.
would have been a PR nightmare.
Right.
But
And as a player, there would have been no way I
yeah,
couldn't have been able to play that
yeah.
game.
And then right, the two teams were kind of in playoff contention, and
Mhm.
so what's going to happen with that result? That's going to be interesting to see if they do resume the game from that play forward, or do they replay the game? They probably won't replay the game, or do they just let whatever team's winning move on with that victory?
Or do you make it a tie?
Yeah. I don't know we'll see what the NFL does because obviously the young man's not going to be playing football and hopefully
Right.
recovers and has a normal life. And with Hank, Hank was a warrior type player, an inside player,
Mhm.
rebounder, strong guy, and he was a scorer. But his thing was he was taking medicine. He knew about his condition, but the medicine was making him droggy. So he was like, what a young man's thinking? Well, there goes my draft status because him and Bo were going to get drafted.
Right.
It's like, there goes my draft stat, or I can't play like this, coach. I need to cut back on my dosage. You know what I mean? So he started cutting back on his dosage of whatever medicine he was taking in that because it was making him too groggy. He couldn't play. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just a surreal moment. And yesterday, or when that Monday Night Football game, that was surreal as well. I mean, you just don't want to see anything like that, at all.
No.
It just wakes you up, and there's been a lot of things going on, Ani. As we get older, obviously you're younger than me. Barbara Walters passed, the
Mhm.
great iconic, news anchor for ABC in 2020 and all that. There's been some other people. Pele's passed.
Yeah.
What's your think of,
Oh.
obviously when we were on the last In the Paint show, Messi won the World Cup. That was pretty awesome.
Mhm.
He's like the most famous athlete in the world right now. He's definitely the most famous athlete on Instagram. Like
Right.
all those Instagram models, like, dude, you're not even close to this guy. Like, this guy's
No.
he sends out one tweet and like 500 million people like it. It's like
Right. Yeah.
ridiculous. But
Oh, no, it's wild.
like he's so popular, and I noticed a lot of people were like, wow, this World Cup is awesome. Because they're basketball fans or football.
Right.
Did you notice any of your friends saying like that? Ani, like, man, this is awesome game.
Yeah, I had basketball people talking about they're watching the World Cup finals and
Yeah,
everything, and I'm laughing because
yeah,
I watch the World Cup
yeah,
every year. Now, I'm not saying I'm the biggest
yeah,
soccer fan. I mean, I played soccer growing up till I was like 15, but
yeah.
it's just funny. I had my friends talking about they're watching the soccer, they're watching the World Cup. They're telling me the standings and who's leading in what division. I'm like,
Yeah, who's
y'all ain't never watched soccer a day in your life. Like,
yeah, yeah. It's exciting, bro. If you do like the World Cup finals, exciting. Doesn't matter which countries in it. Obviously, me and you would like to see, Mexico, Nigeria,
yes, absolutely.
do well. And then USA gets bounced all the time. We're like, okay, how much more interesting is this? But the finals always interesting. Was a great game, and but on top of that, then you hear Pele dies, and it's like
Yeah.
he's kind of the first icon of the sport. Probably the most famous athlete ever. Him and Muhammad Ali. Pele's probably up there just because soccer's probably a worldwide sport, and boxing is too. Obviously, Ali fought in so many countries, but those two, I really can't honestly, Ani, I think Ali passed in 15 or 16. I'm still not processing it like that. I just guess because He's so well known. He's on video.
Right.
He's everywhere. His image is there. I watched everything he ever did. It's like he never left, you know? I know that's a weird way to look at it, but when it's compared to a basketball player, like when, obviously when Kobe passed, like you
Yeah,
feel it,
that's what
like
I'm about to say.
Kobe's gone. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I don't feel like that with Ali. I don't know why. It's because maybe I'm attached to his whole career and like love to watch his boxing matches. We'll still watch him, but Pele is like, man, he's got like an icon that will live forever. You think he's gonna live forever? Like,
Yeah, no, you do. Like when I know they said Pele was in the hospital and he was sick.
yeah,
And obviously, like as me growing up playing, that's what my parents would talk about. They say, you're like Pele, like be like Pele. So
yeah,
hearing he passed, and Ali was the same way. Those are guys that you just always thought was gonna be around. Like, because
correct.
even when you talk about them, like even when you talk about Ali, it's like you hear people talk about him like in a present
He's still here.
Yeah, so yeah, it's still like, even for me, even Kobe, like Kobe passes, like it still hasn't all processed to me.
Gotcha.
Though some of it, like there's some guys that's like they can never die because they just can't. It's just they're here because they made that much of an impact.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. For me, Kobe's a younger guy. In other words, he's 1 year younger than me in terms of his class. So it's shocking to me that he's a younger man. He's still a young man because I don't, look at him as an older guy.
Right.
Whereas you might look
He
at
was
him
like
as
40. He was like 40, 41, wasn't he?
39, 40, a little bit younger than me. So it's like, wow, he's not here. And then you see his kids getting bigger.
Yeah.
That's where I kind of notice it, and then
that makes sense. Yeah.
But it's like, man, Pele is like just the icon. So many people, and that's part of life. Like you said, again, Barbara Walters was 93, Pele was old. So that's normal. But this young man with the Bills is just, a shocking thing. And turning the page, obviously we could keep going on about that, but some uplifting news, or I guess if you're a Chicago Bulls fan, but some uplifting news is, Donovan Mitchell became one of the rare players to score 70 points. I think he went for 71 points in a close win over the Bulls. Just kind of, what do you think of that, Ani? And like, is it kind of like this offensive juggernauts that we're having with Luka? I never
right.
liked that, and him and the Joker a little bit in the MVP talks. Like, where does Donovan Mitchell fit in all this?
I mean, Cleveland's been having a pretty good season, so I think he's there. I don't think he's tier one. I still think like Giannis, Joker, Luka, they're like your tier one guys. Tatum, because Boston's been having such a great season. But I think Mitchell's in the mix. I think he's a tier two guy. Like I think he should get MVP votes. Like you'll see him some votes, but I mean that performance was crazy. I mean he shot it efficiently, and then not just a 71. He had a 71-point double-double. He had like 11 or 12 assists, and it's just crazy. You see Luka having a 60-point triple-double. It's like Ronnie. I think Jeremy Grant had 39, and no one talks about that. Like
Jeremy Grant,
he had 39, but like if you talk about 10 years ago, if someone had 39 there, but his 39 is like another day,
just another day at the office.
Yeah, like it's just crazy how the game has gone where we're just seeing 40, 50-point triple doubles, 40, 50-point games, 60, 70-point games. Like I can only imagine next week we're going to hear about someone getting 52 or something. Like it just it's wild. Like someone getting 30 points is becoming, I wouldn't say normal, but becoming more normal. Like we're not excited when Luka gets 30 points.
No,
we're not excited when LeBron gets 30 points.
Yeah, and he's his age.
He's 38.
Yeah, and it's like Luka. It's crazy because Donovan scored the 71 points, and they won in overtime over the Bulls, and that was 145, 134, and the Bulls are trying to turn the corner, but they're not playing good deep. And like you said, the Cavs are having a great season for where they're at. A young team, and they brought in Donovan and the trade, and only 7 players have scored 70. So it's Wilt, obviously, who did it, 6 times or whatever.
Right.
How he wanted. Elgin Baylor and David Thompson. who did it on the last day. David Robinson, who also did it, I think, on one of the against the Clippers on one.
Yes, against Clippers, yeah.
To the scoring title. Kobe Bryant, who obviously had his iconic 81-point game against Toronto, and now Booker. But even with that, what Luka did on the 60-20-10 is more rare. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's crazy. What Luka did is more rare. So it's like you said, what is going to be next?
I mean, I'll say this: the way things are going, someone's going to get close to 100, and maybe not this year, but it's not like the game is going to slow down, Ronnie.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: there's great defenders. We know there's great players. Are the players like just that talented and that athletic, or do you think it's more like wink, wink, Ani? I'm making 100 million. You're making 100 million. I'm not going to knock you on your butt every day. Like we're all making a good living. This is a great product. The fans like the scoring. Let's keep it going. Is it, where do you see that? Or do you just see that the game is advanced and these players are that good? Or is it more like hey, we're going to pick it up in the playoffs and play better D?
I think in the playoffs, you'll see, you think about it last year, you saw more teams scoring 90 points, like in the low hundreds. Yeah. I just think regular season is more switching lineups up, checking in. Like, I don't know which team is really just playing to get ready for the playoffs right now. Like, there's nobody. Obviously, the playoffs have some ways away, but like, there's only a few teams I feel that are actually playing every night. Even the top, even the top teams, you'll see Giannis, Middleton, and Brook Lopez out, a night. But I think the players are more talented, but we also have to remember, like, let's say there was hand checking.
Yeah.
Obviously we wouldn't see all the stuff that all the performances we see, but I just think guys is getting ready for the playoffs, and the teams that are tanking, they're strategic on how they tank. They'll just they'll just rest a couple guys, or like just the way they're resting guys to minutes. So they say, oh well, you can't rest like your Charlotte who's 10 and 28. You can't rest LaMelo.
Correct. They got a business to run, but it's like they're trying to tank outright and stuff like that.
Yeah, but we'll play LaMelo 20 minutes instead of 35. Right.
Yeah.
So that you're seeing more strategic tanking. You're seeing teams that are comfortable that they're going to get in the playoffs, be at like 500, a little above 500, just because they know they can turn it on. So I just think it's more so teams trying to figure out their personnel.
Yeah.
And the teams that are tanking just being more strategic, because you got Victor and Scoot and Thompson, bro. You got guys that
you're trying to get some upgrading talent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see what you're saying, and it makes sense. You're trying to protect your product, like I said, and it's an exciting product. I don't know if it's the best product, but it's still exciting.
Right.
And the fans like it. So I don't think it's going to change. Like you said, we're going to see some big outbursts. 60-point game maybe here, or we might see a couple 50-point games, or maybe a big early round playoff game or something like that. Yeah, I can see that. Or maybe some guy like KD or somebody just goes nuts and scores 80.
Right.
Who's capable? Donovan Mitchell's obviously capable. Obviously, we know KD's capable. And like you said, the Cavs are only 2.5 games back of Boston right now. They're 24 and 14. And they're playing pretty good. They're 17-4 at home. Brooklyn, we got to talk about Brooklyn real quick before we switch to the high school market. 12-game winning streak right now. They're 1 game behind Boston, and we know Boston's doing good. We knew Boston was going to do good this year. We talked about it many times on this pod. Ani, what's your take on Brooklyn? It's just kind of like what the thing with Kyrie was overblown. The man can play basketball.
Yeah,
we know they could turn it around. They have who gets the credit? The players, Jock Vaughn? Is it collectively? It seems like what Jock Vaughn is doing is good. They just needed a change at the top, but obviously the players were talented. That wasn't a question.
Yeah, right. I think it's collective. I think you got a coach in Jock Vaughn that the guys have bought into. Sure. Jock has helped them on the defensive. Defensively, they're way better than before. Like, they were so bad defensively and had no reason. Like you talk about, they were so talented. They had no reason to be as bad as they were defensively. But I just think the buy-in from Jock Vaughn, You now got Kyrie. Kyrie looks like he's just freely hooping again. And KD is he's becoming KD. And you're getting better performances from Claxton and more consistent performances from Simmons. So it's a collective effort. I just think, unfortunately, Steve Nash just wasn't a good fit. And once you have a coach that is going to let you do that you feel believes in you and you're bought into, I mean, a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
They're a team that we didn't think was going to make the playoffs, and now, they were at one point second in the Eastern Conference. So
yeah, I know, because we talked about that. I remember our girl Chelsea was kind of like, "Oh, Jacques Vaughn, he's eccentric. What is he?" When the hire happened, but I kind of figured out he's a respected guy in locker rooms. I didn't know they would turn on like this, but I knew they were turning around. Every team just needs a jolt, like you said.
Right.
Could be a trade, could be a change in the lineup, cut somebody, send somebody to the G League. Those kind of things sometimes spark teams. It's just that simple because they're all pros. They all can play. We know that. So I'm happy to see it. There's a lot of parity, like you said, a few games out. Teams are only go on a 5-game, 7-game win streak. You're right in it, and that's what happened to Jersey. The Nets are on, or I should say Brooklyn. I'm saying Jersey. Brooklyn Nets, they're on a 12-game winning streak. I still think they're in Jersey, bro.
I sometimes say New Jersey Nets. That's me. I had to correct myself by saying Brooklyn a lot. So
I like the Michael Corrin and Michael Ray Richardson teams, and of course the Doctor. It's like I still say Nets and Drazen and Kenny Anderson and Derek Coleman. Those are some fun teams.
See, that was before me like watching them. I was J Kidd, Kenyon Martin, Richard Jefferson. Like that was me. They had the one big McCullough.
Todd McCullough. They were good, bro. Jason Kidd was so good. I mean,
oh man,
he was like at the top of his game. And I just remember the most thing I remember about them is Shaq, Shaq and his voice. The real MVP, Jason Kidd, like
because they get Tim Duncan that year.
He's taking a shot at Tim Duncan because of their rivalry with the Spurs. But the Nets, hey, we'll see how they do. Obviously, they probably meet Boston at some point. You assume, unless some other team in the East like Cleveland or the Bucks again. Let's talk about the MVP real quick, then we'll jump to high school.
Okay,
if people just like, obviously the Joker's been doing some crazy things. He may win the 3rd straight. Donovan, you just talked about. But, like, is people just now taking Giannis for granted? Like, he's going to turn on the press. He's going to have some monster games. Maybe the Bucks won't win it, but, like, this guy is he that good, or is it just taking advantage, or some other guys just stepping up and playing that good too?
I think Jokic is that good.
Yeah.
I think the MVP race, honestly, and I'm a Mavs fan. I mean, it's Jokic or Giannis. Yeah. And I think we do take Giannis for advantage because the way he gets it, though. Like, I hear people say, well, he just bullies his way and scores, it's like, but you can't stop it. Like, that's what makes it special.
Yeah.
You can't just bully dudes in the league and score and get triple doubles and 40-point games. Like, he does it and you can't stop it.
No.
And I think we take him for granted for how good you have to be to do that. Like, how much of a freak you have to be, like the Greek, like how much of a freak he is. And I just think Jokic is really that good too. Like, I think you just flip a coin and whichever one you got, if you pick whichever one's the MVP, I wouldn't trip either way.
Yeah, it's a great thing to talk about because, like you said, back in the days, the MVP was kind of like, you knew certain players were going to win it that year. Like Magic had his run. Then after Magic had his run, Jordan had just as good a seasons. He could have won a couple of those. Then it went to Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like predictable. Now it's like it's open. And you see, we got work to do in the American game because you see Yannick, the Greek freak, and you see Jokic, and you see Luka. Those guys didn't play in our American system, so
right.
And they might be the three best players. I mean, or they're having the 3 best seasons. So very interesting. But I do like the parity. Speaking of parity, switching gears to the high school game, there's a lot of parity in the high school game.
Absolutely.
And that's a good thing. I kind of mentioned it on the check out ballslife.com to check out the new rankings. Drop the new Fat 50. We have a lot of stories. We're gonna have more content on the website. So you had a recap of the Whataburger.
Mm-hmm.
I had a recap of Damien and down at the Classic at Damien and down at Torrey Pines, where St. John's of Washington, D.C. won. And now St. John's, obviously still undefeated. And now they're up to number 8 in the Fab 50. But before we jump deep into that, do you think, like we say about the NBA, do you like that fact that a Montverde's not dominating? And there's a lot of teams that think they have a chance to win, especially with Duncanville losing their first game? Or do you think that's good for the game? Or do you like to see a dominant team with 3-4 pros?
I like seeing parity. I like seeing how it is right now. This is fun. You go in. This is one of the first years where you go into a game and you just don't know who's going to win. I mean, Duncanville was hot, and who would have thought West Lynn would have beaten them, right?
Yeah.
And West Lynn's a really good team,
right? No doubt. Everybody goes, "Oh, West Lynn." They go crazy. West Lynn should be number 1, and all.
Oh yeah.
That's cool because they're supporting their guys. Like you said, it's a regional game. You want to see teams from various regions do well. We talked about it on the Fab 50 preseason show. And West Lynn was on my regional bubble. That they were there. They could have been in the West. They were in the West region ranking. They could have been at the bottom of the Fab 50. We kind of mentioned that. And teams 40 to 50 could have been a bunch of different teams. And those are one of the teams that could have been. I'll see Jackson Stalstad going to Oregon, playing great ball. I mean, that guy is playing great ball. Hopefully he gets rewarded for that at the end of the season. He'll get rewarded by us like All-American stuff, but hopefully he makes all the accolades he wants. Again, for Duncanville, kudos to them because they go to, they went to the Bahamas. They've been to Hoop Hall West. They've been to Utah. They've been to Arkansas, wherever they go. And then to win in Oregon, to beat Gorman, Bishop Gorman, then maybe or Sierra Canyon they had to beat. They obviously beat Gorman, and then they lose. They have the one bad loss, but their season's not at all a disappointment or nothing. Those guys have a lot of wins.
No, absolutely, they do. I mean, they had a rigorous schedule. They probably have one of the toughest 16-game schedules you can ask for. I mean, none of it. I mean, San Antonio Brandon was the one non highlight team because they're young, but that was a good game still.
Sure.
For 3.5 quarters. So I mean, just kudos to them, just the season they have, and I'm just been enjoying watching high school basketball. I mean, you see the NIBC teams are losing, people talking about upsets, and I just don't think there's upsets this year, to be honest with you.
Big upsets, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really consider obviously a complete non-ranked team. I know we got Paul VI number 1. If they beat Paul, that's an upset, right? But Paul VI lose to a team that's 35 in the country, there's just not as much of a difference to me as years pass, and I really do love that.
Yeah, that's great. I kind of totally get your sentiment. Obviously, the top teams. Obviously, if I'm putting rankings, I want the higher ranked team to win to show that I know what I'm doing. But it's okay, it's okay that they don't and be over the top. Over the years, the higher team does win. But that's from the results that come in, not necessarily because I have some crystal ball. Just knowing the teams and. Okay, this team's stronger. This region's stronger. That's where it comes in. You got to know which regions are strong,
right?
Where the hot players are in terms of hey, this region has a lot of good players for this class, or this area is down. Right now, California. Let's just say they have a lot of good teams. Right now, we got obviously Centennial's taking some losses, but they're 14. Harvard Westlake lost to Liberty in the Classic Academian final. They're 21. They're still in front of Liberty. Bishop Montgomery's undefeated. They're 29 this week. They play Harvard Westlake this Saturday. And then you got Mater Dei who got in there. Mater Dei beat Fate Family at the buzzer in a crazy game. West Ranch is 32, Mater Dei 36, and Sierra Canyon 38. But even though we have those 6 teams, they're I don't think there's a great team. There hasn't shown. Maybe that's Bishop Montgomery. One of those are not great. They're very good, but they're not great. So maybe there's not a great team. I think that the team that has a chance to be great at the end of the season, wow, would be number 1 Paul VI. That's why I left them there. Even though they do have the one loss, is the reasoning is they have the loss to Columbus, but they got to beat, St. John's coming up in league. They got to beat Gonzaga in league. That's 8 and number 9. They do have some good wins. They beat Wheeler. They beat Lake Highlands. So, they do have some good wins. And yes, they did lose to Columbus, but Columbus is a good team.
Yeah.
And there's some other teams that Imhotep ended up winning that event, which was the City of Palms, but they later lost to Long Island Lutheran in New York. So even though they lost to Long Island Lutheran, they're number 5 because they still have that quality City of Palms title. But right now we're at the point where every team can't be below the team that they lost to.
Lost to, right?
Yeah, like Duncanville doesn't deserve to be behind Westland. They just don't. Now people can argue and say, "Oh, Westland should be way high," and like Duncanville's scheduled to try to be number 1. We know that. We know Peavy and his group, and obviously the assistant coaches took over for the season. But like Duncanville, they beat Columbus, they beat Centennial, they beat Lake Highlands. Just and they've have some good wins. They beat Roselle Catholic. So like you said, that's just not going to automatically drop them behind West Lynn.
No.
So it's a very topsy-turvy season. Like you said, the parity is good. It's about what's coming up next, and it looks like these teams. Like if you look at Camden, who I put up to number 2. Now some people say Camden not that good. Well, they're going to have a chance to prove it.
Right. Right.
As you guys watch this pod 148, they're going to be playing Columbus. Right. So if they beat Columbus, that obviously naturally they have that edge over Paul VI because they lost to Columbus. Then they'll have to come back to the event at Roselle and beat Don Bosco, who's led by a great guard.
Dylan Harper.
Yeah, Dylan Harper versus DJ. That's going to be so they got to win those 2 games just this week, and then they're going to go to Hoop Hall and they got to win the games there, so that it's about what's coming up. What do you think about that, Ani? Obviously, what's happened makes a difference, but then they got to go beat Gorman, and they got to go beat Corona Centennial at Hoop Hall, and then they're going to play Imhotep later in the season too. And like we said, Imhotep is up to number 5. So do you think? Are you more of like, hey, Ronnie, this is what happened, or like do you think like, okay, I see why this team is there because they got to beat X, Y, and Z coming up?
Yeah, I the latter where you talk about they had to be X, Y, and Z coming up because I think strength of schedule going forward is going to be is going to show do they move up or do they keep their ranking, right? Like a team that doesn't have a strong schedule coming up and you have them, let's say number 1, right? Well, if they're never going to get tested and they keep winning, are they really number 1? So a team like, especially at this year at the, with all the games and the wins and the losses that are going on, number 1 has to be a team that only has probably 1 loss, right? Yeah. And has a tough schedule with multiple Fab 50 type teams coming up, so they can show that they deserve to be at that ranking. So I think you have to go that way, especially with how everything's going on this year.
Yeah, because it would have been interesting if Duncanville beats West Lynn. They're sitting at 16-0 or whatnot. Maybe that's it. They won beat enough, and they're not going to be in the playoffs. What does that do for their season? Obviously, that didn't happen, but I would have had to make that decision, and maybe they should have been number 1. I never had them number 1, though.
Right.
Not yet, because, again, they might be as good as last year, maybe not. I haven't seen both teams. I think that maybe last year's team was slightly better.
I think last year's team was better.
Yeah, correct. So that's why I'm going, again, that's where how teams are good over years, and they were building to last year. And they went and they only lost the game to Richardson, and they were able to come back and win the playoffs. This year, I just think they're almost as good. Ron Holland's gonna give them a lot of chances to win a lot of games, obviously, and he did. I mean, he dominated a game against Centennial. He dominated a few other games, but maybe they're just a player short, or maybe not as good at a certain position, just quite not as good. And that's why I had them 6. And they don't deserve to fall too far after losing to West Lynn. So I'll just run down the top 10 real quick. Camden, like I said, 2. Montverde stays 3. Arizona Compass Prep, which has lost already, so it'll be reflected next week, is 4. Imhotep, and then we got the next undefeated teams. Link at 6, who's having a 14-0, having a great year. Our guy Elliot Cadeau just committed to North Carolina. John Marshall, who people don't talk about, from Richmond, they won the Chick-fil-A. They're really good. With Dennis Parker, I want to give them a little more shot. Hopefully, maybe we can get them on the pod later on before the season ends. Because, like I said, they were going to have a great team 2 years ago, and then the COVID hit, and the
Right.
Richmond schools didn't play. And they had a chance to have a really highly ranked Fab 50 team in 220, 221. So I think they have a lot of incentive because some of those guys were sophomores on that team. So they're a really good team. So they come in at number 7. Then we talked about St. John's. I saw them this past holiday season in Torrey Pines in beautiful San Diego. Again, they're in the same league as Paul. They're 12-0. Gonzaga in the same league, WCAC, as those three. 9-0, 11 at number 9. So they're at ranked number 9 and 11-0, and then Duncanville. And then after Duncanville, those middle teams have a bunch of losses like Columbus, Sunrise, Wheeler has 4 losses.
Right.
Centennial. They've all beaten up on each other, so to speak. Then a little bit lower, you got Ben Davis undefeated in Indiana. If they go undefeated in Indiana, they'll climb pretty high. They're 18. And then Westland comes in at 19. What is anything surprised you over the last couple of weeks, or obviously teams are beating up each other? That's not a surprise, but does anything surprise you, whether it's a player or a team, that's how well they're doing?
Man, I got to watch Show Stats some in the summer, and I knew he was good. I didn't realize he was this good. He's really, really good.
Sure.
He's one that just surprised me. Because I knew obviously it's like you see White, he's going to Oregon, right?
Sure.
Then you're like, okay, he's going to be an impact player.
Yeah.
And obviously we'll give him the superlatives that he deserves. But I mean, he's one of the best guards in the country.
No doubt about it.
And he's really showing that this year. Like I watched that Duncanville game. I went back and just watched that game, and he was fantastic, and that Sierra Canyon game. So I'm just surprised by how good he is. Like I just didn't realize he was that good.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised, to be honest with you, that Christ the King and/or Cardinal Hayes and Stepanak are not winning more games. Again, maybe they'll pick it up. I know it's a hard win to win in LA, but Sierra Canyon's a step below than what they were for the last few years. And for Christ the King to lose that game, I just thought they'd play a little better. You know what I mean? And they bounced back in the game you saw, but they got to play better to really move up and get back in the rankings. They're not playing too well right now.
Yeah, I was surprised. I'm watching the game against Sierra Canyon, then going and watching with Cardinal Hayes. Obviously, Cardinal Hayes isn't as good as Sierra Canyon, but a good team.
Yeah.
And watching how CTK was really just moving the basketball and playing together. And I was like, man, this is a completely different team than what I saw on TV.
Yeah.
It's like maybe if they get back on the right track that, they can play to their ability. So it's just surprising that they're still taking losses, that, they're so talented.
Yeah.
That it just to me, it's just weird that their season's going the way it's going.
Yeah, no doubt. I understand what you're saying. And again, they might jump in the back in the rankings. Right now, as of the rankings, when they came out a few days ago, they lost to Paul. Again, Paul has some really good wins, and they lost to Sierra Canyon. So they're 6-2. Again, we had 15 new teams, so check out on ballislife.com. We got another like 50 on the bubble that are, they're right there that could jump in. The bottom of the rankings have some undefeated teams. I'll just shout them out. Staley of Kansas City, they're 45. Having a good season. They beat the number 2 team in their area pretty handily. Briarcrest Christian of Eads, Tennessee, 17-0. They're doing well. Olympic of Charlotte. Park Center, who is going to have a big game coming up this week. Park Center, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Minnesota basketball is pretty good.
It is.
And then Lake City from Idaho. They've done really well. They got their big man rolling. They've got some big wins. They also beat Curtis High School, who came out west for the Damien and Zoom Diallo and his team. They went to the third place game. They went to the semifinals. Zoom is really good, and then Garfield comes in at 50. I was going to obviously put either Curtis or Garfield 50, but the local rankings in Washington have Garfield as number 1. So Garfield's undefeated. I go with them for now. But again, it's not going to be easy to stay there. But yeah, Curtis is a good team, and Zoom is really good. Like you said about Jackson, Zoom is playing really well.
Yes.
Obviously, with him and D-Don, those are probably the 2 best junior point guards in the West. They might be 2 of the best guards just in the country, period. And D-Don bounced back from a 2-2 performance. Obviously it's not just D-Don, but Liberty High School.
Right. He's the headliner.
Yeah, he's obviously the headliner. And They went 2-2. Coronado beat them in the consolation title game at Tark. Tark was a very competitive bracket won by West Ranch of California. They have a really good team. Boise State bound. Andrew Meadow was the MVP at the West for West Ranch at the Tark. But then they came back and won the Damien tournament. And they did a good job, beat Harvard Westlake, handed Harvard Westlake their first loss. But Liberty has 5 losses. Like I said, they lost a couple. They lost to Kell, Georgia, which is a terrific team. Kell only has the 1 loss that they suffered to West Ranch at Tarkanian. So they're number 33 right behind Restaurant, and they're in front of the champ Liberty. Liberty has, like I said, 5 losses, but they deserve some credit for winning that Damien tournament. But they still got to be behind Harvard Westlake. It's kind of like you said, the difference between Duncanville and West Linn. Like, you can't just forget about the 5 losses, but they are on the right track, and they are ranked higher than Gorman, and they might repeat as state champions, even though they've lost. We talked about them losing their big guys. Obviously, they lost Jefferson to St. Mary's, and they lost another wing. They're still doing good.
No, absolutely. No, you're right. You're right about that. Liberty going 9-5, and Bishop Gorman, they taking a couple tough losses. I was kind of saying, I was like, man, if the scores are kind of Faith Family, they lost close one. I think they lost somebody else fairly close. Like, they're a team that I'm like, I just thought they could, make some noise. I don't know, just watching them play.
More noise. Yeah, well, they're struggling a little bit. I hear you what you're saying. They lost 4 times. They lost to Centennial.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul West, they lost by about 15 or so. They lost that game by 17 points.
Right.
Then they lost to West Ranch in the title game at their own tournament, the Tark, and where they hosted. Then they lost to Duncanville in the semifinals up there at the Jackson Shellstead show. And they lost, in the 3rd place game to Sierra Canyon. And like you said, Sierra Canyon hasn't looked hot in every game. I think that's the game you're pointing to that you think that you thought they might win.
I thought they could. That's right. That's right. That's why I thought they could have won. I was like,
yeah.
And I was just like, but I've been watching them play. Like, I've been watching. I'm like, okay, like, I thought they could just do a little bit more.
Jace Richardson, their junior guard, has been playing a few games and hasn't. Then playing a few games and hasn't. Maybe they don't have the continuity. Obviously, they have a talented team. I do think Liberty deserves to be ranked ahead of them for now for winning that tournament.
Absolutely.
And again, Gorman didn't win Tark or Gorman didn't win Le Schwab, so they're ranked lower. But doesn't mean they're going to meet down the line, and they have a chance to turn around. But like you said, their team is maybe missing one piece, or maybe their guard play hasn't been what it expected. Again, like I said, Richardson plays some games, doesn't. Ryder Isaldes comes in, he has to pick up the slack. Then maybe one game he plays more, then the other game Richardson plays. It's a continuity thing, and that happens.
Right.
So hopefully they turn the corner. Obviously, we want all teams to do well. Everybody it's going to take some losses. Almost most of these teams have some losses. And, when you look at the tournament you went to, let's talk about some players because we talked about the teams.
Right.
I obviously talked about Zoom Diallo. He might be just as good as Don Thomas. I was kind of hoping I went to Torrey Pines because when Zoom Diallo and Don Thomas weren't going to meet in the championship game or the 3rd place game, I was like, I'm going to go to Torrey Pines. I wanted to see those 2 guys because I saw Carter Bryant, and he's in Sage Hill, which is a small school. He plays for his father, and they were in a smaller division, and I got to see them in the early rounds, and they didn't win the championship in their division, but honestly, Ani, he might be as good as anybody in 224. Now, again, I don't think he's going to finish number 1 in the class. Mm-hmm. That's probably going to go to Flores or Ian Jackson or one of those guys we talk about as the year goes by and into next year. But he's as talented as anybody in that class, in my opinion. He's just not. He doesn't have the team, and he's not complete yet. He's not there yet.
Gotcha.
So, is there anybody like that you've seen that's just going to be really good down the line?
Going to watching the Whataburger, there was some really good 25s. Yeah. like Parker Jefferson,
Yeah.
you know, from Waxahachie, who's been out for a while. And I know in national rankings, he's in the top 25, top 30. I think he's going to be really, really good. I think we'll see him up there. And,
Right.
you know, potential top 10 guy, just because, you know, where the game's going to, Ronnie, skill. Like I seen him shoot and take deep threes and make deep threes, finish with either hand, saw some toughness, saw him put the ball on the floor. And he would just come back from injury. They're like, this is the first time he's playing. Yeah. And I was just like, Parker Jefferson to me, just in 225, I think we'll see him up there, potential top 15, top 10 guy when he's finally healthy. And I think Jalen Lowe is going to surprise a lot of people. I think when he gets to college and just, you know, he had a good summer with Houston Hoops. And I think he's someone that really needs to be in the conversation as a top 50 player in the country.
Right.
That's just, you know, Jalen was just really good, had a 43-point, 12 rebound performance, you know, got back and then had a 29-point performance and only missed like 6 shots total. And that's with free throws and everything. So I think Jalen Lowe's going to see a big swing. And I think Parker Jefferson from Waxahachie, I think we'll see him up there in this class when he's healthy and, you know, when everything just kind of shapes itself out.
Yeah. He's a player I got to set the Bengals Fest off. He's a good player. Obviously, Lowe is a fast riser. There's guys that are coming up. That's why we like to follow the season and not just go on summer performances or rankings. You know, players move all the time, just like the teams, and you got to try to keep up with them. Obviously, that's what we're here to do. And it's been a long holiday season. I wanted to talk a little bit about a few of the standouts I saw in the lower classes. And in the silver division at Damien, you know, Aaron Powell, whose dad is a medical trainer for the Clippers. He played at Bishop O'Dowd and he played at Cal Poly Slow. But Aaron is at Campbell Hall, North Carolina, 224. His team ended up winning that silver division over La Mirada, who's a local team who was didn't have to travel very far to go to play at Damien. And Aaron's got a lot better. I've known him since middle school. He has offers from Arizona State, Portland, University of San Diego recruiting him. Obviously, Stanford is recruiting him because he has good grades. So in the semifinals, a guy threw up a Hail Mary. The ball bounced back to him, and he hit like a 50-foot shot at the buzzer to win. And then in the championship game against La Mirada, he won it with another buzzer. They won it with another buzzer beat Campbell Hall. So, yeah, you know, he's a good young player. Again, he's not a top 100. He's going to play for the Oakland Soldiers. He's 224, and he's going to get a scholarship, and he's going to be a good player, and he has good grades. So, you know, I want to mention him. And then the guy on the opposite team, La Mirada, Julian Gomez. I mean, that guy is like a combo guard, strong. He's a really good shooter. He's a lefty, knows how to get open. And it's still like up in the air. Obviously, he's 225, but I was talking to some lower level coaches, and they were a little like lukewarm on him. And then I find out he gets an offer from UCSB. And UCSB, our guy Joe Pasternak, he wants high level players.
Right.
Pasternak wants big Mountain West Pac-12 type players. He doesn't want a guy who, he's a Big West player. Like, they're at the level where they want better than Big West. And we talked about that, Ani. Like, low-level colleges want really good players.
They want guys a higher level.
Yeah, they think that's one of the themes I got out of this holiday season is, like these high school players they're in a tough spot because these guys are looking for high-level players. Where they get them in the portal, like, they want a guy that they can steal that's maybe right outside the top 100 or in the top 150. They want him at a UC Santa Barbara. They want him at Irvine. They want him at that type of school, a step lower than Texas. Not everybody's going to go to play for the Longhorns like Texas Tech. We see that. TCU. These guys are getting high. Rice. They're getting high-level players. And I'll talk about that a little bit about what the coaches were talking about, like at the Whataburger and other events.
Yeah, I mean, you see, like, for example, I saw a team out of the SWAC out there, and they're recruiting a kid, and I'll mention him because he's another kid I think is going to be a fast riser. But this kid's probably a mid-plus, borderline high major guy, and he's like, those are the type of guys he has to bring to his coach. You know, well, there was a couple of guys that I'm like, he can play for you, but he's like, hey, man, like, coach, look, if we're going to bring in a high school kid, especially at the SWAC, obviously, which are older guys, he's got to be a kid that's Conference USA, American, probably a lower level Big 12 SEC type player. So that's what it is. I think every low to mid major coach wants someone that's borderline a high major guy. Like if
correct.
That's just what's been going on. That's why people are like, well, I could play here, and it's like, and I had to tell some kids that I help mentor, like, it's not that if you can play there or not, is that they want guys that is a no-brainer. Like, you're not a no-brainer. You're a guy that maybe have a chance, but they want the guys that Texas is interested in, and Baylor and TCU. Like, they know, okay, they're probably not going to really go for that kid because they're going to go get a kid that's like a real upper echelon guy. So we want to throw our hat in there.
Correct. They want to keep their just them interested in them. Yeah.
Right. So,
and even if they don't get them, maybe they get them on the bounce back. That's what they're looking at.
Exactly. And that's all it is. Some of these guys are, people don't realize, like in the Peace Jam, when you see a low to mid major school out there, they're there because there's some high major kids are out there that are going to hit the portal that are going to need to go down. They just want to show their face.
Correct. They want that kid to remember. So that's very interesting. As we close out this episode, we talk about that. We've talked about that. I think we're gonna have to dedicate a whole episode of that. Maybe bring on a college coach, talk about what they're looking for. Because like you said, it's not the same as it was 3-4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, like you said, SWAC, they're looking for a freaking Big 12 borderline type player. That's the same thing with the Big West, type coach. They're looking for a Pac-12 level talent.
Right.
Even if they don't get them, they want to keep their name in the hat. And sometimes they are getting them. I mean, these guys are getting high level players. So the borderline player, undersized D2, like, I'm sorry, guys, you're going to have to look for a D2 or some of them are going to have to go to junior college, NAI, because that's what you're going to end up getting. You got to be realistic. I think that's one of the things of 223. We got to be realistic. There's a lot of things going on with these teams and players, and you got to be realistic of what level you are, and it's got to keep being pounded into the players because they're not getting it. They're getting it, I think, but they're not getting it enough, Ronnie, I would say.
No, they're not. They understand.
Yeah,
they have a decent understanding, but I don't think they really know. Like you said, they don't really know what the game is right now. They just kind of hear transfer portal, right? But they don't understand all the details that's come into that and what these coaches are looking for high school kids. Not that these coaches don't want high school kids. They just want high school kids that are complete no-brainers.
Yeah. They want a sure product. And, as we close out, like I said, we wanted to give a shout out to the teams that had some travel issues. So, again, I put up a .com story on Ballislife.com about St. John's, and it wasn't necessarily St. John's because they came from DC all the way to San Diego. But, the Rose City Classic was before the holiday. St. John Bosco win. And obviously St. John Bosco has some great young players. Elsie Harrington, Cade Bonham, 225s, but they couldn't fly back. We talked about the top of the hour in this episode 148 about the flights and all that stuff and how all that's in peril. Ani, I'm glad I didn't have to fly nowhere. I'm not flying anywhere right now, anytime right now.
No.
I know you don't want to either. I don't want to get sick. I don't want the headache. I saw all the tweets and everything. It's just a lot. And I'm just grateful that most of the tournaments went off and got complete and got a champion. Because I know there was a lot of people that couldn't go to the down to the one in Arkansas, the King Cotton. They couldn't make it. So St. John Bosco was in Oregon, couldn't get their flight. They had some vans, so they weren't in the van. They were either in the hotel or they were getting something to eat, and the van got smashed by a big rig. So like, whoa, it's like the whole thing got demolished by a big rig. So we're just glad that Bosco wasn't in the van. So they had to get another one or whatever. So then they come back, they drive back to LA, 20 hours or whatever, 11 hours. It's 11 hours, I think, from 11 or 12 hours. And then they find out that their flights to the King Cotton are canceled. I think it's Southwest. Let's just blame it on Southwest because everybody.
Right.
So I don't know. So they can't get there. So then Saint, I guess that would be Saint Ignatius. No, Saint Ignatius was at Tark. It was a team in Ohio couldn't make it to San Diego, so they took their place, right? Because their flight got canceled. The team in Ohio, so they jumped in that bracket, and at the same time, O'Day and Seattle had their flights canceled, and they were in a real tough pickle because they are the team that was 20 hours away. Again, that's another probably 6 hours from Portland, and then drive the 11 or 12 hours. That's like 20 hours away. So they had 2 bus drivers taking turns driving. They made it all the way down here, and they lost their first game. They got here 30 minutes before their first game started, right? 20-hour drive. They warmed up. They lost the first one. Then they won the consolation bracket. Coach Jason Kerr and his crew. And Ani, when I tell you that they were happy to win the consolation bracket, like that's the happiest I've ever seen a team to win the consolation bracket. Like they were like, yeah, you know, they were holding that trophy. Like it was a good moment for them. That's what high school basketball is all about, really. Like, so kudos to O'Day and to Coach Jason Kerr. You know, he communicates with me all the time on text and stuff. So I'm just happy that they made it, you know.
And like Faith Family couldn't get to Florida. Flights got canceled. Like, you know, there's been a lot of teams that couldn't go out of town. And I was just thankful that I was able to get to New York and then be able to fly back. Like, just seeing everything was happening, I was like, man,
you could have been stuck in New York with a big bill. They're not cheap to stay in New York, bro, for like 4 or 5 days. You know?
A hotel about $300 a day.
Oh man, that's a lot, and that's a lot for a lot of people. So O'Day, you know, I don't want to put his business out there, but they had to put a big credit card on a bill on a credit card, and you know, the airline reimburses them in a timely fashion because they spent a lot of money to get down to that Torrey Pines. And then as we close out the show, I want to give out a shout out to, we talked about St. John's, his coach Patrick Behan. You know, he last year in the middle of the year, maybe early summer, he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. ALS. I don't know. Again, I'm not a medical expert, but I know that that's a serious disease and a debilitating one. And you know, he was a little. I could tell a lot of people in the tournament couldn't tell or didn't probably know the backstory. I wrote about it when after they won the tournament, but he was sitting on a chair on it, and he wasn't up screaming, like, you know, he's taking his time and he's met it up. He's probably got a lot of therapy he has to do, and he told me, he's like, I'm taking a lot of medicines and stuff, and I said, hey man, the best thing that probably happened is, he's like, Ronnie, the best thing is my guys keep winning, you know, like I'm in my gym with the guys, and that makes me feel the best I can, you know. So shout out to the cadets. They beat St. Augustine in the final. Like I said, they're ranked in the Fab 50. They're still undefeated, and they come in at number 8. But you know, I'm glad to be able to see them, and it's crazy because they might finish. It's going to be a dogfight. They might finish 3rd in that league. You know what I mean? And they have an event this week. It's called the Behan Strong Invitational. They invited up IMG. This is on the 3rd, right when we're filming this. It's probably when they're playing as we're filming this. There's like 6 teams playing, so 3 games, and it's like all his buddies and guys that he has connection to, you know. So you know, 6 teams that he has a connection with the school and the coaches too, and they're all playing, and all the proceeds are going to go to fight for him and to fight, you know, Lou Gehrig's disease. So shout out to Coach Behan for getting his team out to San Diego and for winning, and obviously the fight. He's, like we said at the beginning of the show, it's like much bigger than basketball. You know, he's you know, we hope him well, wish him well, and on that note, we just end on that note because it's a good thing. I'm glad that he's doing that they're doing that event at St. John's there in DC. And regardless of who wins or loses, all the proceeds are going to
coach. That's just crazy that, you know, one of my friends, his mom, someone was close to, she passed some ALS, and so I know what that does. I saw how that does to the body. So for coach to fight, be fighting and playing, you know, and coaching and doing what he's doing right now, I mean, that's a warrior right there. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. And those kids were happy, you know. Again, like, not everybody in the gym, mostly people in the gym were rooting for St. Augustine because they're the home team. But yeah, Donnie Freeman had a great you know, MVP of the type performance of the tournament. You know, I want to shout out some of their players before we get off. Pete Newman, sophomore guard, made a couple big plays. Malik Mack, who's headed for Harvard, you know, he had 19 points in the championship game. And Daquan Davis, 224 guard. He was their leading scorer throughout the tournament in the 4 games. But, just wanted to also mention this. Because the coach mentioned me, Malik Mack, point guard, going to Harvard. Ronnie, he's really good to be going to Harvard. Like,
Yeah.
Harvard and the Ivy League is getting some dudes. Like,
oh yeah, Yale got Samson all the time from Richard Lake Highlands. Like,
yeah, we talking about real dudes like Harvard, Princeton, Yale. Those teams, they're getting really good players. Like we talked about, you got to be realistic because Malik Mack is terrific. So like, It's awesome to see those kids. It's particularly like more African American kids going to like Ivy League schools. That's awesome.
100%.
Like. And so it's great way to end the show. I think we'll end that now. But like I said, shout out to Coach Behan. Shout out to all the teams that are trying to get in there and win and keep climbing in the rankings. I know they don't care about the rankings, but they want to win. You know what I mean? Like, that's the main thing. You want to keep winning.
Ronnie, they care about them rankings now. Don't downgrade your rankings. They care about them now. These teams care about them.
Yeah, they look at them. I get you. They look. They don't want to be shortchanged for sure.
Right.
Look at West Lynn. The whole world's going crazy. David Stoudemire is like, I talked to David Stoudemire a little bit. I said, hey, check out these rankings if you don't like the other ones, because he was going crazy,
Right, no, I was saying this about West Lynn. I ain't trying to compare, but you had them the highest I've seen.
Yeah. Again, they're not in front of Duncanville, but they deserve to be in the top 25.
Absolutely.
They deserve to be in the top 25. But now the pressure is on. They can't lose to no Oregon team. That's what changes. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just be losing. Because like you said, Duncanville can't lose either. It's going to be a district game. They'd be a really big upset, but still, they can't lose. I guess that's the key. Shout out to everybody. We're about to check out. Hopefully the young man for the Buffalo Bills is okay and long term. Hopefully Coach Behan, keeps fighting his fight, and St. John's keeps winning. I know they have a lot of incentive to win, and it's going to be tough because they're in that tough league. But I think on that note, me and Anya are going to get out of here. Again, appreciate episode 148. Thank you for listening, and take care till the next one.